Make contact, stay connected. Hey friends, Diego the Podcaster here, asking you to please subscribe today to KGRA Digital Broadcasting. KGRA Digital Broadcasting is the #1 official contact for the best paranormal and alternative digital broadcasting network on the planet. Subscribe today and get full access to all content. Watch or listen to shows in our classic vault containing all our current archives and the KGRA classic broadcasts. Use promo code Let's Find Out and save 30% on your membership. That's promo code Let's Find Out in all caps to save 30% off your membership today. Make contact, stay connected. Go to kgradb.com. That's kgradb.com today.
When you step into the danger zone, you don't stop listening. It's Let's Find Out with Diego. Step into it. Ooh, yeah!
Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us the final answer as to what may be behind the veil of reality. The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
Transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's another episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Thank you for taking this journey with me. On this episode of Let's Find Out, delving into the world of terror and mystery, the Realms of Reality series reflects an author who has cultivated a thirst for scary literature since her early days, drawing inspiration from masterful writers such as Ray Bradbury, Stephen King, and Edgar Allan Poe. She developed a love for creating tales that sends shivers down your spine. She's also found guidance in mystery luminaries like Lawrence Sanders, Agatha Christie, and Mary Higgins Clark. Infused with a touch of the supernatural, her writing is influenced by her empathic nature, adding a unique and hauntingly personal twist to her work. All this plus more. Please welcome to Let's Find Out a new friend to our show, CL Merklinger. CL, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No, absolutely. I've been waiting on this interview for a while now because I met you, I think it was back in, I want to say it's October in Ranson. We were over at Snarly Yow's Cryptid Halloween 3 in Ranson, West Virginia. And as normal, days like that are very busy for the vendors, authors, podcasters, and speakers, where you take that time before everything starts, you make your rounds to say hi to everybody. And I was drawn to your table. And no, you were very nice. And we had a real quick conversation before things started. So how did Cryptid Halloween 3 go for you? It was a great day for the show. I met a lot of people and learned a lot of things.
Yeah, the show was great. Very, very well attended, which I was pleasantly surprised at. I got to meet a whole new audience that I don't normally get to be around because I'm from Maryland. And so most of my exposure has been the Maryland area. This year, I started this fall with the release of book 2, Geist. I started branching out into other states. So I did a little Virginia, a little West Virginia. My goal is this spring to branch out into Pennsylvania. So I have kind of a little small cult following in Rochester, New York, because that's where the books are set in the Realms of Reality series that I have out now. I lived in Rochester for 20 plus years and just kind of took my cue from that area and went with it. So
it's funny you mentioned, and you got these interesting towns where you're got a mega following, or places, like for me, I never heard of some of these towns when I do the analytics. And out of the top 10 states in America, none of it's not even my home state. It's states somewhere else, not even close to me. So I was quite surprised. But that's a great thing, though, right?
Yeah. And I've made some connections here or there with some people out in California, and in my travels, whenever I go out places, I try and just strike up conversations and get the word out. And one of these days, one of these days,
Oh,
all the hoofing will pay off.
I'm there with you. I'm cheering for you, and I like to see good people do great things. So, and from what I saw, the people that were visiting your table, you were very busy that day. And so let's get to it, my friend, because
Okay.
very interesting story. I read your bio, and you have quite a mix of influences in your work. But we're gonna get right before I get into that with Interloper and Geist. Touching on paranormal things or unknown. What got you interested on this topic? Because sometimes when it's been my experience when I've talked to people, where they're authors, actors, or any type of media, such things like that, where it all starts with probably either an encounter in their life or there's a family history to this, or they'll hear stories from friends. How did it start with you being interested in
So,
this topic?
yeah, so with me, I've always had a love for the supernatural, the other side of our world, whether it be a parallel universe or whether it be the spiritual side. Um, my father read to me as a child, and that's where my love of reading and eventually writing came from. And he read me everything. I mean, he didn't just read me kids' books. He told me spooky stories. He was very instrumental in moving along my love for all things quirky and eerie and spooky. Then, as I got to be able to read things on my own, I ventured into my own path with the choose your own adventure type books, and then I kind of went into the tales from the dark side, and it became more show centric in my teen years, and kind of evolved from there. I mean, I'm such a nerd when it comes to like anything paranormal. My daughter is named after Gillian Anderson from the X-Files. So, yes, it just, as I got older, though, I started to go into the exploration. So I tapped into and joined a few paranormal groups up in Rochester and started to experience things on my own. That's when I found out that I was an empath. I didn't quite know what that was leading into that. And I went on a ghost hunt, and I walked into a room kind of ahead of the group. And when I did, I felt this immense dread, like out of nowhere. And it was so heavy and so consuming in my brain that I had to step back, and I went back with the group. And then I told the woman about it, and I said, well, can I test it out again? And I stepped in again, and it's almost like it was like there was like a screen. And as soon as I stepped past the screen, it hit. And as soon as I stepped outside of the screen, it went away. And she goes, well, you're not going to believe this. She goes, but John Fisher, the gentleman who owned that house, he committed suicide in that room. And that's what I was picking up on, was that. And that kind of started the whole thing for me as far as really reaching into what I can tap into on my own. The writing thing kind of happened oddly also. I'm a huge fan of the Morbid podcast series, and they were talking about lucid dreaming one day in an episode. And that night I had a dream that I was writing these books. And I woke up and just started taking notes, and then I went to sleep. And the next morning I woke up and I looked at my phone and I was like, what is this? And I had the beginnings of Interloper, from a dream. And so that's how that kind of sort of happened. And it took off from there.
That's amazing, because I run into a lot of people, especially in my circle, where we always have a notepad or a sticky note close by, and if you receive some sort of download, or if you receive any kind of idea, you should write that down immediately, because you're gonna forget it. And that's how, there you go. Books start, that's how podcasts start, that's how movie scripts start. And you already kind of beat me to the punch a little bit there with graduating to the author part, because I was going to ask you, what part of your personal experience went into your writing, but you kind of gave a little bit away into it. But before you joined the paranormal investigating group, prior to that, did you even have any experiences?
Prior to that, yes. An odd story was my grandmother, on my dad's side. I would go down there every summer, from the time I was like 3 until I was 18. And she had this piece of furniture, and it was in kind of like an open area on the second floor. And it was like a chaise lounge, what we would consider a chaise lounge now. I guess it was more of a resting chair back in the 1800s. But it was my great grandmother's, I believe. My great grandfather was actually born on that chair. And so it sat there, and I went to sleep one night. I was like maybe 11, and the chair started speaking to me in my dreams, and it was telling me all sorts of tales. And curious, the next day I asked my grandmother, I was like, hey, so what's the deal with the chair? And come to find out that I heard all the history about who it belonged to, how my great grandfather was born on that chair, how it had been passed down. But what was most intriguing was that the chair is not stuffed with what typically you would think it is stuffed with. It is stuffed with horsehair somewhat, but it is actually stuffed with the ground bones of my ancestors.
Oh my word, really?
And that's my first official experience that I can truly remember. I've always had a vivid imagination and had dreams, but that's the first one that I can truly remember, where I remember like interacting with another item. So yeah, that was kind of cool.
No, with that being said, I can totally get why that item would have some sort of energy, I guess.
Yeah.
And and it's not uncommon. It's more common than people think. It's just, I guess, you have to be open to it, or maybe be selected by that item to be able to receive that information. So with the novels that you're writing, are there like little Easter eggs about your personal experiences in any of these stories? Do you hide them in there somewhere, or?
I hide them in, definitely. And I'm a huge music lover also, like huge. If I wasn't writing, who knows, I might be playing in a band somewhere. I love music. And it's always had a huge influence on me, because I found that lyrics are basically just poems, and they express so much. And so the books, in addition to having the paranormal side of things, they also have a lot of music references, and hence why I created a playlist to go with each of the novels. And I'm going to continue that as the books go forward, putting key songs, key moments in my life into it that way also.
I was just, it's kind of, I'm not to use the word creepy, but it's kind of cool that you mentioned that, because I was thinking now about music, talking about the music. What's your genre?
So I'm kind of all over the place, but my heart, I would say, just because of where I kind of fell into, is like the 80s new wave, goth. So Depeche Mode, Erasure, New Order, things like that. It just kind of ended up Clan of Zymox. I mean, just kind of all over the place.
That is my cousin at that time, because I'm a 70s baby, but raised in the 80s kind of guy. So he was a big music collector. He had records from, A to Z. His thing was new wave. And, it was Thompson Twins, Depeche Mode. It was Spandau Ballet, things like that. And then he introduced me to loving music, but I went a whole different direction. I went to the heavy metal part.
Okay.
I was more of a Wasp, Manowar,
Yeah.
Megadeth kind of guy, as an adult still am. But I recently started rediscovering 80s stuff as well. I was just, before we got on, we did the pre-interview, now doing the interview. I was listening to 80s synth wave,
Yeah.
which is there's something about it just makes me feel a little more creative in a way. And I was going to ask, normally I say that towards the end, I said if you have a book that was going to be made into a movie, what kind of soundtrack would you have? But you already answered that question.
Yeah, I've got the soundtrack to this series down pat. I think I'm going to continue to have musical influences in anything I write, just because that's who I am at the core, and that, influences a lot of my creativity. So,
It's one of those things also with music. There are certain parts of my show where I get a lot of inspiration from just song lyrics, and it could be just like a random sentence or a line or a riff in a song that's like, oh, that sounds great, and it creates a whole what's called a whole pyramid of creativity, and it just boils down into makes your product better, I kind of think, and it's a great homage to those who helped you, be creative. So now with Geist, because is Geist the first book in that series, correct?
Interloper's the first book in the series. Geist is the sequel. Mm-hmm.
Right. I had it right there in the notes too. I told you I was going to mess something up, but
It's okay.
It's been now about a year since the first one's come out, correct?
Yes, the first one came out in November 2023. The second one came out in September 22nd, and it's my goal to release one in this series every fall. And I have about 9 planned in this series right now, plotted out in my brain. Not to say it couldn't go longer, but that's kind of where I see the character developing into.
And without giving spoilers away, well, now with the first book being out of the way and Geist came along, tell me about your universe, my friend. What does Interloper will take us, the reader, into?
Well, it introduces you to Charlie, the main female protagonist, and it kind of gives you a sense of who she is as a person, how she was raised, how she's mostly a see it to believe it, scientific, very detail-oriented person, and how one instance in her life can shake up her whole world and introduce her into something that she would never have believed in or thought to believe in a few days prior to that. And this is going to open a gateway for her to kind of become who she's going to become by the end of the series. So she's going to go from one extreme to the other. And she's going to utilize her knowledge and her experiences as she goes to eventually help others. So this is going to be a journey of both inner introspection for her and of giving back and helping.
And when you started creating this character, where did you draw from? Well, how much of you is into this character?
Charlie is actually very, very much so like me. To the point where I was like her best friend in the novel. Ramona is actually the person that I would like to be. So I wrote Ramona as the person that I would love to see myself be more like, a little bit more bouncy, outgoing, no holds barred. But Charlie is definitely more the girl next door, the quieter one, the more reserved one, the one that's very studious, takes all of her responsibilities very seriously. She's an only child. I'm not. I'm the oldest. So I think it kind of fits in with that first child syndrome where you're the people pleaser, the overachiever, and it definitely shows in her, in the way she carries herself and goes about her in her day-to-day life. So
when you're creating these characters, and I love the creative process of anything, and I think it's a miraculous thing that somebody can actually put pen and paper and come out with a novel. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. The creating process is very beautiful, no matter what it is that you're doing. So your emotions into putting into these characters and the situations that they get put in. I would think you get kind of attached to them, and you might say, I don't want her to do this or that. So how are you working all that out?
So that's a hard one because as the series grows, so like I said, first book it was just kind of like get to know her. I kind of let her be who she was. Heading into the second novel, she had to have some growth. She had to make some decisions that were harder for her to make, and it's going to continue in each book. She's going to have to make harder and harder decisions. And I took a little seminar recently with another author who she comes from a theater background, and she kind of helped us do like improv situations to help you get through and break through situations that you might not be comfortable with in writing, or if you get stuck with an idea, kind of like, well, if this happens, then what if this happens, or what if this happens? And it can open up a whole spider web of possibilities, and then that takes the pressure off of you trying to have to force your character to necessarily do something that doesn't come organically. But it allows you to grow that character. So there's going to be some changes in the next 2 novels that it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to make those decisions, but I have to. So just like with anybody, I know they hate killing off their characters, or they hate, doing something that puts their character in a bad light. But as part of the growth, you gotta push those boundaries.
You do, and that's the evidence of somebody who's writing something really good. I look at it like this, although I'm not a writer, and I watch movies and television shows, and sometimes there's times you get really invested in some characters, and the situations they get put is like, no, please tell me this is not going to happen. But it's necessary in order for the story to continue. And sometimes you have to learn to let go of the character, and new ones pop up. And sometimes that character you thought was gone comes back later on. You're like, oh, good. So, I just recently had an experience. I was Netflix binge watching, which I normally don't do, but hey, it's the holiday. Why not, right? So, talking about your characters, and we talked about having a soundtrack. So, if, for instance, if your novels were made into a television show, a series, or a movie, who would you get to play the main character?
Ooh, I've thought about this. She would be, if I could find a younger version of like Zooey Deschanel, and I probably mispronounced her name. What is there's a girl I can visualize her, and I can't think of her name right now. But just that girl next door. So whoever the girl next door is at the time that this happens, that's who I'd like to play. My character is nothing flashy. She's just your average young woman trying to make it through. It's sometimes I'll be watching something and I'll see someone and I'll be like, oh, that'd be a good person, but I'm drawing a blank as to this person's name right now. I can see her. She's got freckles and red hair, and
that's okay, because there's so many great actors out there right now. So I don't know all their names, but I do love some of their movies.
Yeah.
So it does happen. Now, speaking of like acting in movies, because we're talking about Stephen King, for instance, great novelist. Whether there's a short story or full-length novels, he's influenced the horror scene for decades. And then you get even darker with Edgar Allan Poe, because that is you just can't read Edgar Allan Poe. You have to prepare yourself to read Edgar Allan Poe, in my opinion, because there's so much more to it than just reading it. It's an experience in itself. So, mentioning those 2 names right there, which of their works, which one of them speaks to you the most? Is the one that really like, aha, this is really good?
So Stephen King, it will and always will be The Shining, both the novel and the movie. I mean, I don't think he can top that. That's my opinion. I do love Pet Sematary also, but for me, it would have to be The Shining. And then Edgar Allan Poe, I love. Gosh, they're also good. Telltale Heart was probably the most terrifying to be. My dad would read me Poe, and he would do the sound effects and the voices, and so I would say the Telltale Heart was one of my favorites because he would do the thump, 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 he would do the sound effects, and as a little kid, a 5, 6, 7-year-old, it leads it up to your imagination as to what's happening, even though it's there in writing. It's still terrifying reads. So those would be my two from those guys.
And from the stories that they've written, because there's stories and then there's stories. I'm going to tell you one that really, not with them, but normally if I read a short story or seen a play about a short story,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen a lot of horror movies, sci-fi, nothing terrified me most. Quick backstory. I think I was in 4th or 5th grade at one of those field trips. Parents sign the permission slips, you go out in the bus. So we went up into Kennedy Center, one of the best field trips I ever had in my life. And they were having several plays, and they made one about the monkey's paw.
Yes.
And
yes,
that story messed me up so bad because I've never read the story when I was a kid, because who likes to read sometimes as a kid. I saw this play. Oh my word, that thing, it blew my mind. I could not believe how great that was, and it was so simple.
Yes, it was. That's a great one. As a young child, elementary into middle school, so I went to Catholic school. So I was raised pretty strict, and I would get home from school, and my mom would be watching her soap operas or whatever, her afternoon shows, and then she'd go to make dinner, and I would sneak. Here in DC, we had Count Gore-Vidal at like 4:30 every day, and I would sneak horror movies. And The Creeping Flesh and the Trilogy of Terror, those two movies terrified me. And so that's hence my love for Vincent Price also is epic actor. But story-wise, the story of the girl with the green ribbon was a terrifying one. Where I don't know if you remember it, the girl wears the green ribbon around her neck all the time, and it evolves, and then it comes to find out that the ribbon was what was holding her head on. And as a kid hearing that, that was terrifying, that something so simple as a ribbon symbolized so much and was such a scary thing. And I never looked at a green ribbon the same way again after that. So
no. That yeah. I wouldn't either. Now, going back to Count Gore-Vidal, and I'm thinking you and I, we may have grown around in the same era. They were in the same type of towns, perhaps, back then. Were you a fan of his when he was Captain 20?
Yes.
Oh my God, yes.
Yep. Captain 20, the DC 20. Back when you only had like what, 5 stations. Yeah. That was him.
Because it was fun. I actually, this is where I'm going to start saying I'm in a celebrity. So I'm going to brag a little bit here. Humble brag, of course. When I was in 3rd grade in elementary school, he actually came to our school because they were building a playground, and he made an appearance there. I could have just met Elvis at that point because he was Captain 20.
Yeah.
I mean, what better thing to meet 30-some years down the line, almost 40 years, a prior show I used to do with my old partner. I actually got to interview him.
Wow.
And I was telling him about that day because he remembers his school and everything. I was impressed. I was already a fanboy to begin with. And he was telling me the stories of he was one of the Bows of the Clowns back in the day as well. And talk about Kids Break and all the puppets. It was an amazing story. I can go on all day about Captain 20 and Count Gordon Ball. That'll be another show we can talk about. But I don't. Do you remember? I think he was doing some of the local show as a one of those presenters as a host, and they had the whole gimmick of going to 7-Eleven and get you some 3D glasses, and they were showing the
Yes.
creature
Yeah.
from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah. Yep.
So
I remember that.
You know what? I think I'm going to email him tonight. I'm going to get him on. You and I will interview him. Say, hey, you remember this? He's like, yes, I remember this. We said the story 1,000 times, but
no, he influenced
Yeah.
so much. I mean, that was my only access to scary things that weren't the books that my dad read me. Like it was my time to scare myself, basically. You know, I didn't see anything current horror movie wise until I was in high school. Everything I watched was the old school horror. All the old Frankensteins, the old Draculas, the Fly, the original Fly. I mean, everything I was watching was older horror. I didn't get current horror until I was well into high school. So that little segment he did influenced so much as far as my love for horror.
Yeah, you know, at that time, being young, I was introduced to a lot of things because my aunt used to write the horror movies. She introduced me to the Evil Dead, and at my age, I was the most scariest thing I ever saw. I hid behind the couch crying. I still watched it, and then you move on, and as a teenager, back when they had video stores, you know, I used to rent all the Full Moon Productions, all the Subspecies, Doll Man, Demonic Toys,
Mm-hmm.
and it's much more than the horror. You got to really get into the story in itself. So in today's day, what kind of movies are you into right now? Because there's so many out there, and I don't want to be kind of like a wet blanket, but I just don't think they're all done well. Every once in a while, there's a breakout movie. They're like, oh my gosh, this is great.
Yeah. So, I really loved. So for me, it's about cinematography, and I know that's an odd thing to say about horror movies, but with me, it's cinematography. It's not always about the jump scare. So it's the story. And there was a movie a few years ago that rekindled my love for horror and gave me hope that horror was going to continue to be good. And it was called X. And I want to say it was Ty. Was it Ty? Who was the director? And then anything Asian horror. I mean, you can't go wrong with anybody. The Audition was phenomenal. Those types of things. Current Smile surprised me a lot. And I just finished watching the sequel to that, and that actually was almost as good, if not as good as the first one, in my opinion. My brother got me into the Terrifier series. Again, a throwback to the 80s slashers. And the fact that the character didn't speak a single word in the first movie, and he was still able to terrify you, I found, to be a phenomenal tool to use to go back to that, Yeah,
because sometimes I think less is more.
Less is definitely more.
And you can go a long way because I'm hot and cold with horror. It depends. And I guess it's, not everybody. As some people get older, some of their tastes kind of change. But for me, I found like a movie called You're Next and
Yes.
Everyone Dies.
Yeah.
Wow. It's about slasher and just, the most interesting ways of killing somebody, tastefully in a way, but it was done very well. And I really do like zombie movies. I don't care how good it is or how bad it is. I'll sit down and I'll watch a great zombie movie all night long. I mean, it's a lot of fun, and it's about fun too. It's good. It's fun to be scared, right?
It is. It's very fun to be scared because I think it releases things in us that we just don't get to experience on a day-to-day basis. You have rom-com, you have all those things that that can happen in your life, but these things, they're further out in the fray, and I think that's what entices us. All the sci-fi, psychological thrillers. I mean, I'm working on, in addition to this series, I am currently writing a psychological thriller, which is about a female serial killer raised by a female serial killer. And that in and of itself is a unique thing because there aren't many documented female serial killers, at least in our era. So I find it challenging and enthralling, and it's a check, like a reality check back to yourself, when you write something like this, because everybody always asks me, how can you write that? Are you that person? And I'm like, no, I'm not that person. That's why it's creative, and it's a story. It's fiction. It's not based on any reality that I know. But it's something that terrifies. The ideas, the things she does or is going to do, they terrify me. So I want to write about it.
And that's the whole thing, is to entertain you, creep you out, and terrify you at the same time, all of the safety of your own home.
Yeah, exactly. And I try and be as visual as I can when I write, because when I write, I kind of almost see it as if it was happening, as playing out as a TV show or a movie in my head. That's kind of my writing process and style, which is why I don't type my novels. I handwrite my novels and then I transpose them after, because it goes from my brain through my hands that way. I would not be able to write these novels if I was forced to use a computer. I wouldn't be able to do it. It has to be pen and paper for me. So
yes, it's so much more personal that way.
Yeah,
because
it is.
I do the same thing. I write it down. Like I said, having that notepad next to you, that's the perfect, because if you have a dream, you're sitting somewhere, your laptop's nowhere near close to turn it on and start typing this stuff down. You got to write it down.
Yeah.
And going back in horror, I'm gonna say it's a challenging question, but let me ask you this question: are you the type of person that goes outside, or the type of person that calls 911 when some serious stuff happens, like in the horror movies?
I'm the person that goes outside.
I am too. I have no choice.
I'm too curious. I can't help it. I'll sit. Well, I'll tell you this. I'll sit, like, if I hear something and I'm like, "Ooh, what's that?" I'll sit and I'll think about all the possibilities of what it could be, and then I'll try and rationalize. Okay, what are the percentages that it will be this, and then I'll go check. But I am definitely somebody that has to go investigate. I can't just let something slide by.
I know I'm the same way. And once I go, it's a few times. No, of course, nothing came out of it, thankfully.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why am I out here in my pajamas?
Yeah.
In my Crocs? I'm gonna get mauled by whatever that is.
Yeah. What was funny, because I was at wasn't too long ago, I was sitting and I heard what I thought was a woman screaming bloody murder. I really thought somebody was in the woods being killed, and it turns out it was just a mating, a fox mating call.
Yes. No.
Literally
That's
sounds
funny.
like curdling scream.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. When I first moved to the mountains, I moved from Stafford to Front Royal, like a real deal mountain. My first 2 nights there, I heard this thing is like somebody's getting murdered. This is either a child or a woman. Something's happening here.
Yeah.
And then down the line, I started asking my neighbors. They're looking at me, he just got here. I go, yeah. I goes, the same thing you just said. I have no idea these animals can make these kind of noises.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's very, very eerie when you're hearing it for the first time.
I did not go out that night.
Yeah, I did, because I had to know. I didn't see anything. I saw some eyes. I saw glowing eyes, and I was like, okay, well, it's got to be an animal. And then I got curious as to what animal would make that noise, and then I figured it out. But
no, that night I was not in the right mind to find out. Even though you have all the firearms necessary, you got to have a cool head about you first before you go out there.
Yeah.
So going back to your novels, you say you're writing on something new. Do you have a working title for this new book coming out?
Yes, it's called Baker's Dozen. That is the series. It's going to be a trilogy, and the first novel is Baker's Dozen: Rooted in Evil. So it's going to kind of give the story, the backstory, the introduction to this character and who she is and why she became who she became. It's told first person, and it's going to also kind of break those. It's going to do a little Ferris Bueller where, she'll be in the middle of telling a dog, and then she'll talk to you. She'll go, "Oh yeah, I know what you're thinking. Why are you doing this?" And then, she's a little sassy. She's very dark, very sarcastic, a total opposite of my character in the Realms of Realities series here. So, but yeah, it's a fun one to write, and I should have my first edits to my editor end of January, and hopefully have it out and ready published for the spring vendor shows. So,
I was going to ask you about that because now 2024 closed pretty quickly. I know you were very busy out there being a vendor and meeting a whole new demographic of readers and from all different parts of the states. For the listener of Let's Find Out, our friends that would want to learn more about your works, your books, your novels, and where they can purchase it and where you're going to be in 2025, what can they find out?
Okay, so you can find out everything you need to know for the most part on my website, which is novelsbychristina.com. And then I'm also on Instagram at Realms and Reality Series. For 2025 right now, I have a big one, Scares That Cares, down in Williamsburg, Virginia. And that's in March, end of March. And that's where I'm hoping to have Baker's Dozen make its first appearance. And then soon after that, I'll be at Screamerverse down in Roanoke, Virginia in April. And then in July, I'm scheduled for the Right Women's Book Fest, which is a female author book festival that is run here in Bowie, Maryland. And I'm looking to book more dates, but that's where I'm kind of at right now for heading into 2025. So.
Well, that's a great start, my friend. And once the book comes out, and I know you'll be super busy, if you can carve out one day later in 2025, let's talk about your new book and then get you back on the show.
Oh, yeah. That sounds great.
Thank you, my friend. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Please check us out on all our social media pages, as well as on YouTube and Rumble. Like, share, and subscribe. Also, Let's Find Out is on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Catch the show on Saturdays at 2 a.m. For more information, please visit kgradb.com. That's kgradb.com. Together, we will get one step closer to finding out. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
Let's find out with Diego. The power of Diego madness. Ooh, yeah.
All content for Let's Find Out is property of co-host Diego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, co-host Diego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.